What's up, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about this right here, this beautiful carbon fork from Travers bikes. If you've never heard of Travers bikes, I don't blame you. I hadn't either until they reached out. They're a small operation out of the UK led by Michael, and he's the one that reached out to me to see if I would be interested in trying this fork. They mostly do titanium bikes, and they're a supplier for a few different brands that are a little bit smaller, not your typical Shimano, SRAM, that kind of a thing. But this carbon fork is something he thought I would be interested in because I tend to like riding rigid bikes and especially converting mountain bikes over to a rigid setup. So this right here is the Evo Prong. It is a boost space, full carbon fork, tapered steerer, carbon steerer. And unlike this one over here, this DIY carbon bikes that's from an open mold, this is one that he has developed himself over the last 10 years. This is the fourth version of it. So I ran this fork on the Binary Havoc. It's a bike that I've been testing out. I'm still in the process of testing out. And it's kind of like it's drop bar mountain bike is how I would describe it. But really on the adventure side. Kind of think in the Cutthroat, Fargo, that whole realm of things. So let's go over some of the specs really quick. The first thing to know is that it is boost spacing only, but that's pretty common nowadays. So don't know that that is really a bad thing. That's the only thing you can get it in. One of my favorite things is it comes with this zoom axle on it, but it works as well as you can see right there. Any Fox axle is going to work on here, and it screws in nicely on the other side right there. That's where it's threaded. You're not dealing with some other type of like a nut or something on that side. While we're down here, we might as well look at this. There is no flip chip, so you get one offset. That's 55 millimeters, which is actually kind of on the high side. Well, I'll talk about that in a second, but there isn't a flip chip. Typically on these, you're going to end up with something more in like the 52, 51, or even in the 40s. This is 55, so it's a little bit farther out. On the axle to crown and the spacing here, you can see it's nice and wide. You can fit a 29x3 up front, and the axle to crown is 492. 492 is like, I guess I would say maybe a 110 mil suspension correction. Typically you see these forks in either a 100 millimeter, so it's in the low 480s, or you see it a little over 500 or right at 500 for like a 120 mil. This is kind of right in the middle, so that gives it a little more versatility because you could work between either size. Right here you'll see it has internal routing for the brake cable, which comes out right there. When I threaded the brake through, there were no issues. It went just straight through. It's not like it got lost inside or anything. It just came straight through there. So no issues with the routing. Would I prefer external routing? Honestly, yes. That's just kind of my preference in general, but it does add to the look of this fork because it's honestly, it's a pretty good looking fork. I got mine in the matte finish with the gloss decals on it. You can also get it in a gloss finish. This is also an option here, the 3-pack mounts. You do not have to get these, but you can if you want. Otherwise, it does not come with them, and you get to choose what kind of bolts you want when you order it from him. And then the last spec I'm going to mention before I will talk about weight, don't worry about that, is it comes now with a titanium top cap and bolt. So it's kind of cool looking. It says, "No, you're awesome." So you get a compliment the whole time you're riding, which is pretty cool. I wanted to talk about the weight side of it on its own because I think that's a big reason why people swap to these forks and why they're more interested in carbon versus a steel fork or something like that. This fork is 680 grams. For perspective, that is just like a couple of grams heavier than the Envy mountain fork. And Envy is known for being, you know, kind of top of the line and lightweight and everything like that. So good on that. If you look at Whiskey, that's kind of another premium option out there. This is about 50 grams heavier than the standard height one, but it's also taller. So that's probably where you get some of that weight. But then if you look at the Whiskey LT version, which is their taller one, suspension corrected for a 120 mil fork, I think it's a 500 axle to crown. It's right around there. That one and this are virtually the same weight. So you're getting something that is very lightweight if that's something important for you. It's right up there with the big dogs. I also think that's true when it comes to the look side of it. This is a really good looking fork. I really like the top to be a little beefier to kind of match the head tube, and I just think it looks better like that. But looks wise, I actually had a couple people on the trail say, hey, that's a pretty cool looking fork. So although it is kind of like beefy and big, it's not blocky and chunky and still, you know, got some curves, and I just think it's a good looking fork. When it comes to the ride feel, it's kind of your typical carbon fork. There were no surprises there. It felt good. It didn't feel overly stiff. Under hard braking, I didn't feel it flexing super hard or flexing really at all, honestly. You can kind of get that on a fork that doesn't have a lot of rigidity or stiffness to it. When you start to brake, you almost get a shuddering because the front end is, the fork's basically being pulled back. And so didn't feel any of that on here. For the ride feel, this is an interesting spot for me. As I mentioned, 55 millimeters of offset. What that's going to do is that is going to reduce the amount of trail you have, which is how far behind the steering axis, if your head tube angle kept going straight into the ground, the difference between where that hits the ground and where your tire basically hits the ground, that's your trail amount. Modern mountain bikes have gone to longer trail numbers. It gives you more stability at high speeds. And I would say it slows down the steering. It just gives you that more stable feeling you're used to on a modern mountain bike if you've ridden one of those. Shortening up that trail is going to give you faster steering. Some might even say twitchy, but it's more sensitive to steering input. And so that can be really good if you are on slower speed trails and you need to maneuver more, but it might not be exactly what you want, especially because if you are going to this and you were running, say, a 120 mil fork, you're already steepening up the head tube, so you're gonna have a little bit faster steering anyway. Now, with all of that said, you are now on a rigid bike. Modern mountain bikes are designed with the idea of the modern suspension in there, which is really good. On a rigid bike, you're not just blasting through rock gardens. You can, but you're probably gonna get hurt, or you're gonna crash. And so you do have to be a little more picky with your lines, and so a little bit of a faster steering feel is helpful. So I don't know that this is a bad thing. I just kind of think that maybe a flip chip would be a good thing to have here, just so that if you wanted to, you could switch from, you know, a little bit quicker steering to a little bit slower, a little more stability depending on what you're doing. Finally, on the price, 332 pounds is what it's listed for, and I think it's 30 pounds shipping, something like that. So in the US, you end up at around 400 bucks, a little over that. So you end up significantly cheaper still, even with that shipping out of the UK, than it would be for the Envy or the Whiskey options. But it is still definitely more than some of the other options out there that you would get from these people that directly import from China. Some of those run 150, 200 bucks, 250. So some people might say you get what you pay for. I have actually had good experience with one of those. It's only been one, but I've had a fine experience with that. I do think having this middle ground option is really nice because you get the backing of a company, you get some real design and thought behind it. Again, 4th generation, it's been produced for about 10 years now, and you have a full-on company to go to on that. But the price is a little bit easier to swallow than some of those really high-end ones. Overall, though, I actually thought this has been a great fork. Really grateful for Travers for sending it out for me to try out. A carbon fork is something that is a little bit hard to really try out, honestly. I mean, I think most people think, okay, what features does it have? And what's the price point? And am I gonna die on it? Is it gonna crack and make me smash my face? I totally trust this way more than I do some random Chinese mold that I import and, you know, get off of some sketchy website. But I don't have to spend as much as I would for a name brand one here in the United States. So it's actually a pretty great option. If you've been looking for a carbon fork, I would encourage you to go check them out if you're interested and you don't want to take a risk on something, but you don't necessarily have $600 to drop. So thanks again to Travers for sending this out. And if you want to see some more videos, I have a few other reviews coming, as well as some other where I share my thoughts. So subscribe if you want to see those, and thanks for watching. See you next time.